Great to see you, Robert, looking as cool as I think I would expect you to look, which is exceptionally cool.
At my age, that cool is all I'm trying to achieve.
You've nailed it. Absolutely nailed it. I'm going to start with a little poster. We've got this little poster and we're going to flash it up right now. Let's have a look. Power to the people, vote air chauffeurs. Mr. Maurice Armour Campbell, who's now getting a lot of publicity off the back of this, is standing as an independent for South Cunningham constituency. And I have to say, Robert, he is ripping you off. He's ripping off the famous Citizen Smith. I want a reaction. We need a reaction to this immediately.
First reaction is, I was speechless, actually. I suddenly thought, why can't people be original and find their own little motif? And then I got very pissed off that they were using my picture, which apparently they can. I don't know why, but that's, I mean, my dad was very funny about Citizen Smith. My dad was a big trade unionist, and he never found the series very funny, because the character was such a joke. So my dad really didn't like it. So he wouldn't approve of that. He'd be turning in his grave now, just the thought of it.
What do you think of, because I think you got a bit sick of Citizen Smith or people talking about it, so I don't know if I'm being annoying even by talking about it, but looking back, because it's the best part, it's like 3 decades ago, isn't it? What do you think of Citizen Smith now, looking back? What does it kind of reflect to you?
Well, the thing is, it was John Sullivan's very first job as a writer. It was a scene shifter at the BBC. And because he had access to all the producers on the 4th floor of the Light Entertainment at the BBC, he managed to get a script through to a very famous guy called Dennis Main Wilson, who was responsible for Steptoe and Son and Tony Hancock and all those great sort of comics and sitcoms of the 50s, 60s, 70s, and got this commission. I mean, it's incredible in that day and age that you could get a commission straight away, and therefore it was the first thing he ever wrote. I love the idea. I thought it was a fantastic idea, and I know for a fact that John Lennon was a big fan, because he almost gave us permission for the song Revolution, which we were pushing for, but then it was now owned by, I think, Michael Jackson, because the Northern music went to Michael Jackson. Anyway, that's a long copyright story. How do I think about it now? With great affection. I just wish that the BBC had allowed it to flourish a little more and not contain John into a domestic sitcom. Because when the Tooting Popular Front, which he originated, which was such a great idea, when they went on manoeuvres and went, and took the tank into Houses of Parliament, that to me was what the series was all about. But for some reason, the BBC decided to condense his writing into a domestic sitcom. And ironically, the last episode of Citizen Smith was called Only Fools and Horses, which he went on to write rather successfully.
I didn't actually know that. You see?
Yeah. And of course, more freedom with the second series to develop it more. The boys and I are still very much in contact. My 2 mates, Speed and Tucker and Ken, we still make contact. And there was a talk about trying to resurrect a senior Citizen Smith.
Could it be reinvented for 2021?
Be interesting, wouldn't it? I mean, really, it's interesting having mentioned Only Fools and Horses, of course, because Del Boy is Wolfie. And Ken, my sidekick, the Buddhist pacifist, is the brother. So all the characters, the South London characters, John just took from one series into another.
When they said, go on.
No, I ran out. I can't think of anything to say on Citizen Smith other than, my boys, I've got 2 young boys of 21 and 18, and they love it.
It is, it's an all-time classic. It is funny because I alternate sometimes whenever I say something, like, for example, earlier I posted about the Super League and we did a video about What does it say about capitalism? And people were like, okay, Citizen Smith. Didn't even know I was interviewing you. So I sometimes, people deviate between, obviously I'm a right-wing sellout, and being Citizen Smith. That it often flashes up as a reference point, I've noticed. What I was going to do, what I also did, I did a shout out to say that I was interviewing you. People are very excited. Sometimes when I do this, I get horror stories about people I'm interviewing. Fortunately, that doesn't apply to you. So, for example, Robert is a genuinely lovely person. He was a customer of the wine shop that I used to work at Beaconsfield. Even my grumpy Tory boss liked him.
Oh my God, yes, I remember him.
Was he grumpy?
It was when I showed my left-wing attitudes. Yeah, when I told him his wine was too expensive, or where did you get this from? And yeah, yes, no, he and I solved our differences. Sometimes I'm always fascinated by people's attitude when they think they know you, and of course, for many, many years, I was only known as Wolfie Smith. So when I came in, I think people just assumed that I would be some, left-wing reactionary, which I'm turning into as I get older. But that's another story.
Well, we'll come on to that. Just before I do ask you, just because I'm interested about the arts and so on, particularly at the moment, but these are people have gone on a real nostalgia trip. Does he remember playing Hamlet with the Royal Exchange and coming to Kirby on tour? I was in the audience and all the pupils in my Catholic girls' school fell in love with him. Someone else says, I'm just throwing flattery here, but this is what people genuinely said, so it's accurate. Is there any limit to his talent? Having seen him on stage and Thomas Beckett and the Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, where he stole the show both times and on screen in various guises. Is he anything he finds difficult? I'd be interested in that. Tell him I still get goosebumps remembering his Hamlet at the Royal Exchange in 1983. Does he remember the season at the Royal Exchange Theatre in Manchester in the late 70s? I went to every show. I mean, people like this is quite emotional for people. I mean, you do seem to me, you are someone who's very passionate about the stage. But so if you've got any memories about the things people are talking about over such a long period of your career, but what does the stage mean to you? And maybe if you want to refer to things like the Hamlet and the seasons that you did in the late 70s in Manchester.
Well, the Royal Exchange was very important to me because it was up just during Citizen Smith, and Citizen Smith kind of took me by surprise. It was not where I was going, and the success of it was enormous. I mean, I think it was 20 million viewers every Thursday night after Top of the Pops, and I couldn't go anywhere. I couldn't literally go anywhere. I was like a teeny bopper, and I remember once being escorted from a supermarket by security guys because I was being mobbed. I can't really express, and it frightened the life out of me, and I left after 3 series. I didn't want to do anymore, which John Sullivan was terribly upset about because there's a pattern with situation comedies, certainly at that time. The third one, going into the 4th series, then you hit the big time. But I pulled out and I went to the Royal Exchange, and I did many, many shows up there before I did Hamlet. But I do remember when I opened Hamlet in 1982, I was leaving my flat at the time near the Arndale Centre and walking down towards the theatre. And there was a guy on a roof. It was a builder, and he had a helmet on. And he shouted, "Power to the people!" And I instinctively just put my fist up as I thought, oh God, and he slipped off the roof, down the tiles, right? This is in the centre of Manchester. And he grabbed the guttering because he was falling. And the guttering snapped with his weight. And he fell onto a shop awning. And he snapped the awning and he fell onto his feet. And he walked across the road and asked me for my autograph.
I was going to say, I was like, did he die?
No, he was, this huge crowd gathered and watched this scene in front of, and I got to the theatre, usually an hour before the show, and I said to Graham Murray, who was the director at the time, I said, Bram, I'm never going to lose Wolfie Smith. He said, Robert, come here. Look out this window. He said, that queue is for tickets, returns for Hamlet this afternoon. He said, they're students and they're coming to see you. I said, no, they're coming to see Wolfie Smith. He said, it doesn't matter. He said, they're coming to see Hamlet. And he said, and they're seeing Shakespeare for the first time. So I realized then the power of TV and you know.
And it's interesting because the people here who can recall very precisely when they saw you, maybe that is they watched you on television and then came to the theatre through that. I mean, I found that because a lot of actors, they're terrified of being typecast, aren't they? And was that your fear at the time? But actually, it provided a launch pad and allowed audiences who wouldn't necessarily be that predisposed to go to the theatre to actually go and see it for the first time.
Yeah, I mean, you cannot avoid typecasting, certainly with TV. You know, once you've done a TV show, and there's a terribly funny, oh my God, the BBC used to have an annual gathering of on the light entertainment floor of all the shows. So you get all the Porridge people and the Dad's Army people and the Citizen Smiths and Only Fools and Horses and, you know, all the guys. And they'd have Christmas parties. And we were all quite drunk one night. Or I was leaving and I left with Nick Lyndhurst, who was Rodney Trotter in Only Fools and Horses. And we got to the gates leaving the BBC and a cab went past. And the cab went, power to the people! And I, you know, oh, yeah, cheers, mate. And then Nick is waving for a cab and the guy went, plonker! And I remember Nick saying, I wish I had your catchphrase.
I was going to say, it could be, you did, I think, win the lottery in terms of catchphrases because there could be a lot worse. Who do you look back? Who are you most, which sort of actors are you fondly most recall having worked with?
Goodness me, I've been in the business an awfully long time. I mean, I think Julie Walters probably is the most varied of all the people I've ever worked with, and there's always something I've aspired to as well. And Julie is a great friend of Alan Bleasdale. That's where, you know, my work with him has been very important. Julie's a remarkable person. You know, she's very rooted in she knows herself very well. And to me, that is very important for any actor, is to know yourself, because a lot of actors I admired when I was younger were people like Laurence Olivier. And I was very disappointed when I met him because I didn't know who the hell he was. He seems to be a bit of everything. But it's interesting now over the years since I left RADA in the 70s, how actors now are very rooted in themselves. Mm-hmm. It's very important to know yourself and to express yourself as much as the character. I think that makes sense. Yes, it does.
Makes very big sense. And one of the things I spoke to Stuart Lee about this, the esteemed comedian, and about this certainly applies to comedy, but it applies across the board, which is that, you know, you see it with music as well as acting, that obviously lots, you know, infinitely more people want to become a comedian or a famous actor or musician than are able to do so. It's one of the most glamorous occupations any young person would aspire to. But the obstacles to becoming an actor based on your background have got higher and higher, haven't they, over the years? Do you think that's true? Do you look at the industry in terms of just how expensive it, you know, because if you can people can live off the bank of mum and dad who are young, then far more able to get into the industry. But if you don't have that financial security, then it's become harder.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many avenues I'd love to go down in this conversation. I was at a secondary modern school. I failed my 11+. I went to a secondary modern school called Gladstone Boys in Ilkeston in Derbyshire, which I was very lucky because some of the teachers there were extraordinary. And and the school was a very rough boys' school. The school uniform was a leather jacket and a bike chain. And to say you wanted to go into the theatre, I mean, it was dedicated to the mines, to the steel industries. If you were lucky and clever enough, you go to Rolls-Royce in Derby. And I remember talking to my careers master. I have to do my Ilkeston accent now because I have to remind myself of that moment when he said to me, "What do you want to do when you leave school?" And I said, "I've decided to become an actor, sir." And he said, "Oh, really? Right." He said, "Have you considered a career in hairdressing?" And I remember thinking, that's exactly how people all feel about the theatre. So I've never felt confident about it. And in particularly over the last year with COVID and the lack of support by any government, I've done a lot of work for the Royal Theatrical Fund, trying to raise money for people in the industry, and realizing what's happened to people, actors now. We are so lost. The mental health issues are enormous, but right across society. But in the theatre industry, I think the lack of the confidence that you need to be in this rather precarious profession has been so damaged because of any lack of support. And it's not just lack of support, it's the lack of, oh, does it really matter? It's only acting, it's only performing. So I've been very affected by what's happened to the theatre industry over the last year. And I'm really scared. I've been asked to go back to do a musical in July. And to be honest, I'm really terrified. I've never been frightened of performing ever. That's the one thing I've always prided myself on, is my strength, my courage, my fearlessness about performing, and the fact of being different. But I'm really genuinely scared now, because do people really care about it? The government certainly don't.
I mean, I remember looking back, it's bizarre when you think about when the pandemic began. It's like another universe now. But I remember, talking to a lot of people I'm close to it in the arts, in theatre, and the theatres closed a few days before the official lockdown in this country. It was about a week before. And there was a sense at the time where people in theatre were saying, don't worry, everyone, will be back in 3 weeks. Because originally people forget the initial lockdown was only it was time limited. And there was a bit of delusion, to say the least, certainly promoted by the government and a lot of the media, about the seriousness of the situation that we faced. And obviously they were the first to close, and, first to close, last to reopen, essentially. I mean, what do you think? I mean, what impact? Because this is, it's cultural vandalism, isn't it? To allow theatre, which is so much a pillar of the culture and society in which we live. What does it say about the fact that theatre has been so neglected, and when it's so much an integral part of our life?
I mean, I don't know the facts, but the revenue, it's billions that the theatre gives to the taxman every year. And of course, it's not just, it's the community aspect of theatre. It's the joint experience of people going and sharing a live event together that is, I miss, and I'm sure many millions of people do. But unfortunately, they don't seem to have the voice, unlike, the Super League, which has been phenomenal. I just wish we could raise voices like that about, saving our theatres. I mean, there are theatres that will go dark for a very long time, because their revenue's gone. The West End obviously will survive slowly. The show I'm supposed to be doing is a pretty huge investment because it's a big musical with a huge cast. I don't see how they can perform with half an audience and actually make any money, which to keep it going.
I mean, with the Super League, as you say, it's been phenomenal. I've there are pints of milk in this country which have lasted longer than the Super League. But, you saw this massive outrage and it actually worked. I mean, you know, for given what's happened in football over the last generation, the trend towards money has completely corrupted the sports in lots of ways. Finally, there was a pushback that was successful against that trend. I mean, with theatre, you can see in the US, you know, these vastly prohibitive ticket prices and the West End moving in that direction. Do you think, you know, is it possible? I mean, obviously football is the national sport and it's so integral to our popular culture. But do you think it's possible some sort of pushback could happen against that trend? Not least because, you know, theatre is this self-fulfilling prophecy, isn't it? People talk about theatre as being, well, it's only for privileged middle-class people, and then a system which is promoted, which makes it prohibitively expensive, except for people who are from those backgrounds.
I don't even know how to answer that. I'm just... I mean, the thing is, the theatre isn't for middle-class white people. I mean, you only have to look at certain shows that have a wide audience. I mean, we talked about Hamlet earlier. You know, when I did that as a young man, people were coming to Shakespeare for the first time. And as you've seen by your reaction that I get constantly, people talking about the experience they had in that 900-seat theatre. You know, just before lockdown, I went to see Come From Away, which is about the planes landing in this island in Canada before the 9/11. It's a fantastic play. I mean, that was not a middle-class white audience, I can assure you. So there are terrible generalizations about theatre. And the National Theatre of Great Britain, you know, they have these fantastic ticket prices where you can buy, you know, for 10 quid, you can go and see, you know, some of the greatest productions ever. And the West End is trying really hard. But I think to get, you know, if people want the big musicals, you have to pay for them. That's the problem. But then look at the money they're spending on Sky TV. Look at the money they're spending, you know, so... There you go.
A lot of the, you know, I mean, as I said before, so many younger people do aspire to being actors, and they see Hollywood film actors and so on, and that's what they want to be. But I mean, what do you think about? I mean, I know James Graham; he's a brilliant playwright, an award-winning playwright, and hasn't just written, of course, for the stage, but also for television. I mean, he points out that a lot of our big movie actors themselves, they start on the stage, they start in theatre. This is where, you know, that's where people should be aspiring to, in a sense, shouldn't they?
I think the most interesting thing about film and TV, I've always, and people I know tend to regard films and TV as a way of earning a living. Theatre is where you share your art, as it were, to sound very pretentious. I've regarded my TV work purely to keep my family, sorry, that's not a joke, you know, the ticking over with a decent living. And when I really express myself, it's when I go to work in the theatre. That's when I work best, when I feel more at home, when I feel more comfortable. I have done films and TV, GBH, for example, which I feel inspired by, you know, but it depends on the writing and on the thing. I mean, films at the moment seem to be generally around Marvel and you know, King Kong meets Godzilla. And I mean, I did Maleficent last year, 2 years ago, with Angelina Jolie. Nicole Kidman played my wife, Owen.
Well, I would expect nothing else, actually, Robert. Frankly, I think that is the obvious match.
It's the only reason my two sons said I have to do it.
It would be criminal if you turned down that particular part, I have to say.
Yeah. No, I mean, no.
Did you tell? How was it? What was it like? I mean, look, I mean, you're a big name in your own right, Robert. But when you were actually acting, what was it like to act alongside? I mean, you know, Nicole Kidman is, I don't know. I mean, what was that like? I've got no more profound question than that.
Do you know the one thing I love about this business and always loved about the business is, do you know what? generally, I'm speaking. There are occasions when people do react like a big star, but I've only met that once, twice. Most people work together as a group of people on a project and work as evenly. And the lovely thing about, because I was very, very class conscious when I came out of school when I was 16 and then went to RADA. The first person I ever met at RADA was a girl getting out of a Rolls Royce. I kid you not, she was one of Hilton's family. So I've always had a kind of working class chip on my shoulder. But the one thing I've always found in this industry is there's no class, there's no distinctive, it's all for one and one for all. There's a quote.
That's a great quote. I was funny, actually. I was just talking before I interviewed you, I had to pop to the vet, get some cat food for the two little pussies, one of whom is named Rickman, after the obviously dearly departed Alan Rickman. But he's obviously Zoe Wanamaker. He's performing in July somewhere, and I can't remember where. But when you haven't been able to act obviously for a long time. Some people have. I interviewed Michael Sheen a few weeks ago, and he's been doing online stuff. But I suppose that's not the same, is it? Do you feel like you're kind of itching to return? I mean, you said you're scared. I mean, I'm interested in what do you mean scared because you haven't done it for a while, or do you mean scared because of the future of the industry? What do you mean exactly? And what's it like to dedicate your life?
Many reasons. I think one of the main reasons is I haven't looked after myself as well as I normally do when I'm working in the theatre, because I tend to use the theatre work. You warm up, you keep your body in check, you watch what you eat, you sleep better because you're tired, and unless it's the mind's ticking over too much because of what you're doing, which usually happens in rehearsals. But your body feels better because you are doing what you love. And this last year has been very difficult in terms of drinking too much. I smoke still, which is worrying. My two boys hate it. I built a shed down the bottom of the garden, which is my smoking shed. I get caught by the boys sometimes. I feel like a 12-year-old. So I've not really looked after myself like I do when I'm working. So I'm worried about the physicality of going back, because it's 8 shows a week is tough. Believe me, it's very tough. I have been doing some Zoom things for the Royal Theatrical Fund over the last few months.
Robert, so my internet just collapsed. Completely collapsed. It's back. It's back. I might just explain that. That's only happened. It happened once when I was live, which wasn't helpful. But one of the big, I'll just explain, because there was a sudden jump in that video while people are watching. My internet collapsed. That's Virgin Media. I'll name and shame Virgin Media. Perfectly happy to do so. Virgin Media suck. And that's they are a terrible, terrible service. I'm now on my 5G because Virgin Media are so terrible. And I'm going to keep naming and shaming them until they stop being crap. Sorry, Robert. Sorry about that.
Try and travel Virgin trains.
Oh, do you know what? All of them are just... I mean, that's the thing. Trying to work... Obviously, we all depend on the internet in order to keep our jobs and our lives going, and we can't depend on it because they suck. So tell me about the Zoom plays.
Well, about 10 years ago, they asked me to become president of the Royal Theatrical Fund, which is a charity for the industry, which I gratefully accepted because it does such great work, not only for actors, but for stage crews and lighting technicians and box office staff and front of house staff. And over this last year has been horrendous what has happened to the industry, and there are so many people crying out for help. So I approached a guy who runs a thing called the Lockdown Theatre. It's Paul Jackson, is an old friend of mine, and Rob Grant, who does Red Dwarf. We combined forces with the Royal Theatrical Fund, and we devised 3 plays, Private Lives, which we got the copyright from the Coward Estate. And I did that with Emma Thompson, Amelia Clark, and Sanjeev Bhaskar. And then we did Waiting for Godot with Michael Palin and Joanna Lumley, who narrated the whole thing for us. And then we did Real Inspector Hound, and those 3 productions raised over 100,000 quid.
Wow.
Phoebe Waller-Bridge and Olivia Colman kindly donated the Fleabag Fund to the Royal Theatrical Fund, which they've raised over 500,000 quid. And that money is literally being pouring out into the industry, because you can imagine everyone, you know, all these freelancers in the industry who've not worked, literally not done anything, and they have families and mortgages and all the other responsibilities.
Which is incredible. It's absolutely phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal. I mean, before I ask, I was going to just think about just politics and stuff. But before I do, that itself is a brilliant, and that just shows people coming together during this terrible national emergency.
The point was, though, and actually the point I was trying to make was the response to those readings. I mean, they were literally readings. I was literally carrying a script of Private Lives. So was Emma. So, you know, but you were in our offices and in our studies and whatever. But the response from people saying, "Oh my God, it was so good to hear a play again. It was so, what great words, what, you know, how I miss it." And I do, people do. And when the theatres open, they will flock back, hopefully.
They will definitely flock back. What have you learned? If you were going to take just a look back at this whole very, very bizarre and unsettling and grim period of our lives and human history and all the rest of it, what do you think you've learned from it personally? What would you take from it?
Well, my son said something interesting this morning. He's also terrified of going back to normal. He said, "Dad, I hope we don't just go back to normal. I hope things get better." And I suddenly thought, actually, that's really interesting how people do. I think people are very nervous about the sudden surge of going back to normality. Will it be normal? I doubt it. I don't think things will ever be normal. I think what's been happening, certainly in America, with this dreadful man Trump, and then the George Floyd thing last night with his release, and then the man's imprisonment, and then the Super League thing. I think there is a shift, and then the conservation aspect, of which I'm very concerned about. Watching the lovely Swedish girl, Greta. Yeah, from Thunberg.
Greta Thunberg.
Yeah. There is a real shift with young people at the moment who seemingly caring about things that we seem to have dismissed. And I'm really very optimistic that the kids are going to change things for us.
I'm 36, so I can no longer really claim to be younger the way I once did, although I still always look like Macaulay Culkin in Home Alone for eternity. I think it's some sort of syndrome I've developed. But anyway, you just, I do think it is younger people, particularly younger millennials and Generation Z, the Zoomers, as they're called. They're going to save us. What you mentioned earlier, you said you were becoming more left-wing with age. Tell me why. Explain what you mean by that, and what do you mean in practice?
I've always been intrigued by where I come from, and I spent most of my teen years trying to escape where I was from and being embarrassed where I was from, because I wanted in fact, my son said to me the other day, "Dad, it's really interesting because we recently sold our home, our very, very beautiful home where we lived for 25 years. Wow. Which had all the trappings of middle class success, with a tennis court and swimming pools and in the countryside. And the money started to run out, and I suddenly couldn't afford to do all the work that I could on this, that these huge properties need. So we've now moved into a standard 4-bedroom house, which has been a bit of a shock, but it started to remind me of what is important about, that I earned an awful lot of money when I was very young, years after Citizen Smith, all the way through when I worked in America. I did quite a lot of movies, and I was earning a lot of money. And suddenly for the first time in my life, I decided I could buy anything. I mean, I was listening to Ed Sheeran on some chat show the other day, and he was talking about the fact he could buy the stormtroopers ship from Star Wars, not the little one, but the big one, and he went and bought it. And I do things like that. But I think the lockdown and having lost the house and having realized what is important is those people that live in this house and people that I can help as I get older. And the people I can get help seem to be people with similar attitudes towards me. And I've been thinking a lot about my father. My dad was a great trade unionist and a great speaker. And I'd go to his meetings as a young man and listen to my dad talking about the working man and how people loved him. And I started to remind myself of thinking back to where I used to be. So I started to reevaluate my life, if you know what I mean. So, and consequently, I started to become more left-wing again.
I mean, we live in an atmosphere politically, which is, for those of us who are on the left, it's not what I would call ideal as things stand. I mean, do you look, you were involved, I mean, as in the 80s, you marched with miners, as far as I'm aware, you come from that background, you understood the kind of, same as myself. My dad was a senior shop steward, more left-wing than me, actually. He was a revolutionary Trotskyist, but in militant, which I suppose partly GBH, I don't know if it was partly inspired, but anyway. But nonetheless, I mean, do you look at the way, you've said that young people definitely give hope, and I we see them with Black Lives Matter, the climate justice movement. Politically on the left, in a way they weren't in previous generations. There's a stereotype of young people are left-wing, then become more right-wing. But in 1983, actually, Thatcher won the youth vote. So there's a lot of revisionism about history, actually. I mean, do you look at society today in terms of where Britain's going, right-wing, populist, nativism very much on the march? I mean, do you just sometimes think, this is, where is, other than young people, this is...
Yeah, but I think... Oh, and I think last night that with the Super League being abolished, certainly by the British clubs, it was a curious thing to do during Brexit as well, which I found amazing because they were all Spanish and French, Spanish and German clubs. I thought, well, what are these poor kids? We're going to need visas to go and see a match, where by the time Brexit really sorts itself out, and with all the borders that are being. Anyway, that's another story. I'm just digressing now. But I think that with that Super League last night, the movement of the power of people, there's a phrase I used to use a lot, is really good now. I mean, people have a voice. Social media, if there's anything good about social media, it's giving people a voice. And hopefully the right voices. There are some pretty bad voices on social media, as we all know. But when things combine and the voices become a chorus, things happen. We made the Prime Minister last night address the nation about football. I mean, Boris Johnson gave a toss about football, but suddenly now he had to, because the whole country just went, this can't happen. And I get excited when that, whether you say that's left wing or not, I don't know, but it's voices together in harmony.
Before we ask the final question, people brought it up, so I just have to ask. And also, I love the series Extras, so because Extras was fascinating because people had to play them kind of these bizarre parodies of themselves. And you had to insult a dying child. Yeah, just tell me about that whole experience, including when you read the script, presumably, and they told you have to insult a dying child. Just the whole.
Ricky never told me that. That was never part of the offer. I did a chat show with Ricky. Michael Parkinson on Thames TV, talking to ITV at the time. with Antonio Banderas, Ricky Gervais, and myself, the three of us. And Michael Parkinson knew I did an act. He knew that I did a little segue of, I used to do Singing in the Rain, the whole musical, in 30 seconds. And Michael Parkinson knew that. And he said, at some point, I'm going to get you to do it. And I said, oh, wait. But it was a really naff intro. It seemed so set up. And I did it, and I thought, oh, God, it was excruciating. And I remember Ricky sort of sitting there squirming. The audience loved it. You know, it's 30 seconds of, you know, I'm singing in the rain, all the singing and dancing and falling off the chair and all that sort of stuff. Anyway, it was about 2 months later, I got a call, and I was down in Dorset with the kids. And it was Ricky. He got my phone number. I don't know how. And he said, I want you to do my show, your extras, and I'd love you to do that thing you did, the Singing in the Rain. I said, that's what it was. He didn't tell me I was going to do it in front of a dying kid with cancer, who I was going to tell to fuck off, which actually I thought my dad was going to be actually into an earlier grave than he was. My dad never recovered from seeing that. He was so upset.
Sorry, that's actually, it's just very funny. Were you tricked into doing it? Would you have done it if you'd known what you were asked to do?
Yeah, in retrospect, I don't know. I mean, it's had such a huge reaction over the years. I mean, the amount of press I get from and comments on social media via America and stuff, who still see it. Yeah, I mean, Ricky gets away with it, doesn't he? You know, yeah, I guess I would. I've got a lot of respect for Ricky now over the years. I still think Stephen Merchant was the brains behind his initial work. But I love Ricky's bravery when he presents those awards. And what I really do love about Ricky is his conservation things with animals, his love of animals. He does say some incredible things. And he's a genuine talent. I have to say, when we did it, the crew were apoplectic because they hadn't read the script. They didn't know I was going to do it. The kids said, "Oh, I don't like musicals. I don't like musicals. I never heard of Alan Bleasdale." I said, "Oh, fuck off." I remember this. It was like, you remember the film The Producers with Mel Brooks, with the audience, where they were just sitting there, you know, Springtime for Hitler, just with open mouth. The entire crew were like, I can't believe he just did that.
It worked really well. It was it was extremely funny. Extras is one of these series that I comfort watch it when I'm feeling a bit stressed. Yeah. I've watched it so many times. I've watched the episode you've been in. I don't know how many times I've watched it, but it's the sort of thing when I just need to escape from politics or writing or whatever, or do a bit of exercise. I just flick on Extras.
Yeah. I have to say that him and the lovely girl whose name I can't remember, which is annoying me. Can you remember? Go.
Yes, I remember. I'm not Googling. You mean Ashley Jensen, of course, which was on the tip of our tongue.
Yeah, I mean, I remember doing the number for the kid in the hospital ward, but I remember their two reactions, Ricky and Ashley's reactions, were so funny. You know, really embarrassed that I was doing this number for this kid who they knew was dying. Oh, God.
Not in real life, though. Let's probably make that clear. Yeah. That would have been a lot worse. Just finally then, I'm interested, just conservation in terms of where do you think the struggle, because that's something you're very passionate about, the struggle in terms of conservation, where do you think it's at? But finally as well, because I know a lot of aspiring actors, a lot of younger people watch and also listen to the podcast version of this. What would you say as well to people who, you know, partly inspired by acting, such as your own? What would you say to them?
Right, there's two questions there.
Completely different questions as well.
We went from my environment to.
Yeah, I just thought in my head I should mention the environment, and then I panicked and added in the other one as well.
Environment thing. The one thing that really angers me at the moment is HS2, which is ploughing its way through the British countryside willy-nilly and just literally demolishing acres and acres of our precious land, which is getting smaller and smaller. That really angers me. And what really angers me politically about that is who owns the bloody thing? Where is 80 billion? 80 billion, it's now reached 102 billion, which is money that could be well spent in the National Health Service. But, you know, that's my real bête noire. I think that I'm also a great supporter of Greenpeace. I've got my own rock with my name on it at the bottom of the North Sea at the moment to stop deep sea trawling, which is also, I had a lot of trolls giving me abuse. But then again, the British government not really supporting the fishing industry either, particularly as that particular place in the North Sea where my rock is placed is a protected area, which people are still deep trawling. So pick up my rock. And in answer to your last question, I advise people to get fit, to get well, and to be honest about why they're in the profession.
Do it for the right reasons.
Do it for the right reasons.
Not fame hunting for the sake of it.
No. That will never work.
Robert, it's been an absolute honour. We've gone on a real roller coaster, including being disrupted by, and I'm going to repeat them, Virgin Media, the scoundrels. But that was brilliant stuff, and really appreciate it.
I hope we don't go around in circles, though.
No, we didn't. It was great.
No.
Robert, that was great. That was really, really good. Really good.
It's really good as well. I'm a big admirer, and well done you.